time doesn't necessarily heal. I'm not in agreement with that statement at this point in time. I might change that.
Art Riddler, thank you for joining me on the Mindful podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Dermot. Look forward to this.
I know it's been a long time. I was lucky enough to meet you at the last Art Riddler exhibition last year. There's another one this year, and I'm so happy that we managed to sit down and I get to introduce you to the world.
Thank you very much. I look forward to talking to you and going through my sort of larger story.
Yeah. Well, let's start with the mystery, shall we? And
Okay.
we gotta let people know why the disguise.
The disguise, I suppose, at the very start was I wouldn't be great at social media. So I wouldn't be a big fan, sort of historically, of just generally posting pictures of myself and that type of thing, be it on Facebook or
Mm.
Instagram or any of that kind of thing. And I also genuinely thought when I started off this competition that it would fall flat in its face. So instead of having the embarrassment of people knowing who I was and it falling flat on its face, I said, well, if I wear a mask, at least nobody will know it was me. And I can sort of drift off and not carry any of the baggage of embarrassment.
Well, I guess for having practical reasons, it has created this beautiful mystery around it, and you're engaging with the public and artists who have no idea who you are. Has there been any sort of surprising benefits of the disguise and of remaining anonymous that maybe you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I suppose there's two sides to it. There's benefits for myself and over the last few years, because we're on to kind of year four now, I suppose, at this point. And benefits, say, for the artist is as it has developed, there's kind of a trust in you now. And maybe that's aided by the mask because I have to be discreet from my side. So therefore, I have a lot of artists sharing their stories with me. And I think whether it's down to sort of my anonymity, but they definitely feel more comfortable talking to me about, you know, quite personal things a lot of the time about their practices and their life stories behind their art and that. So it does have a benefit, I think, for the artist. There's because I'm into protecting myself, maybe they have a sort of a sense that I'll protect their stories, which I would.
Mm.
But for
How did you?
myself,
Mm.
sorry, what it allows me to beautifully is cruise in and out of exhibitions, opening nights with obviously without my mask, and nobody knows who I am.
Do they recognize your voice, or do you purposely try and avoid chatting?
Yeah, no, I don't. Like, I wouldn't go up to the artists and really talk to them. Now I have,
Mm.
and like in fair, like it is kind of funny because sometimes people start talking to you about, say, the Art Riddler, or so on and so forth, and you're kind of smiling to yourself internally. And but no, it's just the anonymity allowed me kind of glide in and out, and because what you definitely don't want to do at somebody's exhibition is take the limelight away from them. So, if everybody say knew who I was, they might want to be talking to me, but it's not my event. So, the focus should be on the artist.
Well, that's what you're all about, isn't it? It's about handing this power back to the artist.
Yeah.
Gallery, you've been referred to as a disruptor because I guess the traditional way a gallery might work, where they take a large percentage of the profits, the sale of profits from the sale, and they're very much the gatekeepers. And you kind of came in as a disruptor. All the sale money stays with the artist, and you put your own money into this big event. And I would imagine that maybe some corners aren't particularly happy about that idea, are they?
Yeah, when I came into it, my plan wasn't to be a disruptor, and it still isn't. So because galleries are obviously businesses, so
Mm.
I respect what they do. Naturally they obviously have to take commission from a sale because they have utilities premises, all of that stuff to kind of pay for. So yes, I think some probably aren't overly pleased about it, and then others are supportive.
Mm.
So it's kind of, there's some definite ones who support, because at my exhibitions I would invite the galleries and some turn up and some don't. So maybe you could take something from that.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to see, I think that because your event is, I think, having been there, more accessible, it seems more welcoming and open, less intimidating than a normal gallery, which a lot of people are just afraid to walk into at any time of the day. And I would hope that they would push a new audience into galleries who may have used your one as the first art exhibition they've ever been to, and then could open up a whole new audience for the other galleries.
Yeah, and that's the idea, because obviously, like, it was sort of top secret who I am and all of that at the sort of the first year, the second year more so. But my, in order for my plan to grow, say more of my friends would know now, and the idea, they've come to my events and they're looking for art. They're of an age category now that are, looking to, if they're lucky enough to be able to purchase some art, to put in their homes, they're asking me, where should I go? So, obviously, if my event sort of times with that sort of,
Mm,
request, fantastic. I direct them purely towards my one. But for the other 11 sort of months of the year, I would direct them towards the various galleries. Uh,
mm,
so it's not, I'm not sort of trying to create a divide between myself and the galleries at all.
yeah. Let's get into your own story and how you became the Art Riddler.
Yep.
And am I right in thinking that you haven't, up until this point, shared the real story as to how you ended up as the Art Riddler?
No, not at all. And it's been a little bit strange. Like, it's the missing piece of the jigsaw.
Hmm.
Because I have been on sort of, I've been interviewed before, and but it's focused mainly on just sort of the general idea behind the Art Riddler. But that's purposeful from my side, because I haven't shared the wider story as to what actually got me into it with any.
Hmm.
So I haven't.
Well, before we get into it, I want to say thank you for trusting me and my listeners and my viewers with your story. So take us back to the time when you realized this was a path that you were going to go down.
Yeah, it just happened, this path, but it happened based off about 5 years ago. At this point, my wife became sick. So she was diagnosed with cancer. And when she was diagnosed with cancer, it was very aggressive cancer and it had spread all around her body. And they thought that she would live for about 4 to 6 weeks, but she managed to live for roughly 12 months. So what happened is COVID was also on during that time. So that complicated matters, going in and out of hospital and all of that kind of stuff. So it was, I suppose, obviously it's never a good time, but there was an additional layer of difficulty with that. So after she passed away, and she passed away at a young age, like 37 years of age is young, and we
Mm,
had two very small kids at that point. You're sort of roughly 1 and 3, at that time. So, they were particularly young. It's I suppose particularly cruel in that sense. So
mm,
after she passed away, I sort of, like, grief is kind of specific to different people, I'd imagine. So I can only sort of talk from my perspective. But you definitely feel lost. But when you have two young kids as well, you know, life continues. Like, while it changes for them in certain obvious aspects, school still happens the next day, summer camps still happen, all of that. So your itinerary and looking after them doesn't change. So it's quite, you don't get if you want to call it a down period,
mm.
say that allows you, say, grieve in more of a natural sense. So I
Were you in
found,
Ireland at the time?
Yeah, yeah. No, I was in Dublin. So what I sort of found, not through design, is I used to go into town a little bit. I took some time off work and I would go into town and I would sort of just, I suppose the kids would be in school and I'd, sort of relax or walk around town. And it's very hard, particularly with a young deaf, because if it's someone who's older, we're all on notice that, at a later date, which is the idea, that
Mm.
a mother or father is going to pass away, you'll pass away, that type of thing. But certainly not when someone is taken so quickly and at such a young age. So I found myself going around town, and I went into the National Gallery, and I remember walking around it, and it's a place that I wouldn't have sort of frequented. But I found for the period of time that when I went into it, that my mind actually switched off. So that was the first time that, for say that hour I'd be in there, that my mind wouldn't be racing. So after sort of a couple of visits there and a couple of visits to other galleries, it was the only thing that actually helped me switch off, albeit for a short enough period of time. So it kind of dawned on me that this was quite therapeutic for me. So as sort of more visits to galleries, that I was doing, I was becoming sort of more generally interested in the art. So there was a space in town that I used to visit quite often. Subsequently, it's closed down. And the more I go in there, I'd see, I'd be looking at various artists going, I wonder how they sort of effectively make money, because like they might have poured their heart and soul into, producing 15 or 20 pieces. They'd be on display for, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and they might sell a few, or they mightn't sell any. And I just sort of said, I wonder, could I change that in some way? So because art was giving me an outlet, I sort of said to myself, well, maybe I could assist the artist because they were assisting me, albeit they didn't know they were assisting me. But because it's
Mm.
important, particularly with the death, that you can naturally focus on the death, and you still do. Like it's 4 years now, and it's a daily occurrence. It doesn't disappear. And I often question that. Time's a healer type of statement that we've all heard. So if you're to ask me at this point in time, I'm not quite a believer in that line.
Mm.
It's very much kind of peaks and troughs. But I then just sort of had the idea, right? Actually, sorry. One of the important things I found, and this might be of assistance to somebody else out there. It was very important, or it turned out to be very important, to have an outlet for myself away from what my life was. Because, like everybody else, I have a job. As I said, I have a family. My wife had passed away, and you know, life moves on. So you're expected to fall back into all of those pieces. So back into the job, back into being the dad, and all of that. But what was and still continues to be of great assistance to me is I have a totally different outlet from my day to day job and life. Like this is completely different to what I do and what I would have done if you roll back the clock 5 years ago. So it's a great outlet because when I'm on Instagram, I'm here talking to you, I'm running exhibitions. My mind is completely switched off from my day to day life. My day to
Mm.
day life is good. Um, it's coming around, but it's obviously there's a great sadness there for myself personally. But there's a great sadness there also because I have two children. So you're looking at them, and I suppose in one sense you're also grieving for their loss. So it's a kind of you could say a complicated grief as
Mm.
opposed to say a lone grief. And yeah, so that's where I am at this point.
Mm. When you got that news together and you realized that your lives weren't going to move in the trajectory that you'd hoped.
Yeah.
What were those days and weeks after that like for you both?
Yeah, there's certain moments in all our lives that are cemented into our minds. So I remember being brought into the hospital, and when I look back on it, it's sort of purposely done, and I can understand why. But our appointment was at 5:15, on a particular day, and I didn't think anything of a 5:15 appointment, but
Mm,
the reality of it is we were the last appointment. So I remember arriving into the sort of reception area of I presume, the oncology section, and there was nobody else there. And then we were brought in, and that's when the news, is broken to you that you do have cancer. Uh, like they don't say to you, you have X amount of weeks or months or years to live. They break it to you that they've spotted things, and it's a particular type of language they use. But that 5:15 appointment is very purposeful, and I get that, because I'll never forget the scream from my wife. I won't forget that. That's in my mind forevermore. Um, because, and particularly, a mother and kids,
mm,
it's ultra cruel in that sense. But that's when the news was broken to us. But a very strange thing is, and it's very difficult because, like, they'd be talking to me on the side, you know, and say the doctors, and they would be sort of saying, it's like, I'm not sure of the kind of the structure that they go through with other people, but they were sort of telling me, it's I remember actually, now that we're just talking, they said she mightn't actually make the commencement of the chemotherapy. So like it's very, and that was only like, maybe from memory, possibly 3 weeks away. For whatever reason, it was 3 weeks. But like, all of a sudden you're there going like, how is that? You know,
mm,
and but she didn't know that. Because there's lots of kind of difficult choices you have to make. You don't want to sort of ruin somebody's sense of hope or condemn them, type of thing. So that wasn't shared. So, but then obviously, she did start it, and she lasted 12 months. So, but it's a strange sort of announcement. But one of the things which was most difficult, very helpful for me, but very difficult, is you had the nurses saying to me, you should start preparatory grief counseling to me. So
mm.
my wife's still alive, but, and I did take it up, and I started it, and it was incredibly helpful, but quite bizarre, because you have your wife who's alive, yet unbeknownst to her, you're doing preparatory grief counseling. So it's an extremely strange position to be in. And yeah, that's a very strange thing, because you're kind of like
Mm,
counting the person out before they've even had chemotherapy, or things might change. But the reality was things weren't going to change, at that point. So while I found the preparatory grief counseling excellent, it was a very, yeah, extremely strange, because they're talking to you obviously about life going forward and how life's going to change, and you have two kids. you know they're sort of they're focusing on you and your children, as opposed to, say, your wife who's still alive in the hospital. So it's,
mm.
it's extremely strange, but not
Yeah.
not to be shied away from. I found it very helpful.
And I think you talking about that could actually be hugely helpful for people to find themselves in a similar situation. Did you get any chance between the two of you to talk about What was that in that 12 months to come to any kind of, I don't know, uh, sense where you're making sense of any of it, or was it just a struggle day to day with the illness?
Yeah, it was.
Did you avoid certain conversations, or were you open to having them? How did that 12 months pan out?
Yeah, it's. I suppose. Did we sort of have a frank conversation about it? No,
Mm,
because and it's the difficult position that you, if you're having those very frank conversations, you're admitting to the end.
mm,
So it's kind of, you know, you probably should be having those conversations, but when you're having those conversations, you're sort of, you've accepted the fate. So there's nothing wrong in having those conversations, and there's nothing wrong with not having those conversations. Because by not having those conversations, have they impacted my life or the kids' life going forward? No more so than the whole other mess, you know? So
mm,
it's not a must do. So, but obviously they had conversations with me. I knew there was a finite period of time. You know, who's to say ultimately what's going on, you know, in the person's life, you know, in their own mind. So you're trying to keep the spirits up.
mm.
So there's no right or wrong sort of approach to it, but in our instance, we didn't really have those conversations. No.
Yeah. It's a poignant image, you walking alone through the city, in your grief and finding yourself in these galleries, the bright colors and the creativity and the silent spaces and in a place that maybe you hadn't really been drawn to in that kind of a way before.
True.
That you were, do you feel, and maybe this is a bit woo, but do you feel in a weird way you were kind of guided into these spaces, or was it just somewhere you ended up?
Yeah, like put it this way, I wouldn't have normally before all of this found myself wandering around town going into all
Mm,
the art galleries. If you were to ask me like to name an art gallery in town, I would have said the National Gallery, and that would probably be the beginning and end of it.
mm,
So yeah, like you can say, is it sort of were you unbeknownst to yourself directed into one of these places? And you could look at it like that, yeah. But either way, I found myself in the place. And you said one of the points at the very start, and I've said it before, and it's very true, is a lot of people don't tend to go into these galleries because you have a sense, sure, I've no place here, or, you know, I don't have tens of thousands to purchase art. And I would have had that feeling. But for whatever reason, I went in and I opened the door in the first place. And in not to it has changed my life by doing that
mm,
because I have an outlet as opposed to like I do know another person whose husband passed away and you know she's on her own journey but you know her journey is very much all the time is say plowed into the children which is fully understandable but if you forget about yourself in the situation you my take on it is you're a better you can be a better parent or more present parent if you do have an aspect of joy or an outlet in your life. And there's nothing wrong with that given the situation. And I just happen to find art. Uh,
mm.
that has assisted me hugely because I have a whole new side to my life that I didn't have. And it's very much a calming influence. Uh, it's a hopeful area, it's a fun area, and it's very important to me. It's extremely
Yeah.
important to me. Like people don't realize how much, like people think me setting up the exhibitions, and yes, I fund them myself, and I fund the main prize myself. And if I stop to look at the figures, I'd pass out. But it has been worth tenfold more than I've gotten back than people might think I've given. So
Yeah.
it's been it's been more than worthwhile.
I think hearing this, your story has added another dimension to the mask in a way. The idea that, at the exhibition, that you're behind this mask, and there was a part of you that up until now nobody would have known. People would have known your persona as the Art Riddler and thought what you were doing was a wonderful thing, but that there's this part of you that was kept away from that, and it literally was behind behind a mask.
Yeah, ironically enough, actually, when you put it like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there
Do
was,
you,
sorry, Dermot.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, because like I'd be walking around the exhibitions. Actually, one of the things, and it was a natural kind of curiosity people had when I set up the first one.
Mm,
And, I I paid for it all, and I wasn't taking commission, and I was putting up a price. Well, firstly, people didn't believe it, which is understandable. But secondly, some people were waiting for the catch. So the catch, I think some people felt, was that year two, all of a sudden things be rejigged. You'd, you know, I'd take 50% commission, so on and so forth, and that the first exhibition was just to kind of lure people in. But in my mind, I was always kind of saying, you know, if you only knew, like it's actually nothing to do with that at all. Now, it's evolved and we're on heading into year four of it. But particularly for the first one, it was purely as a sort of a self-healing approach to it. It was nothing to do with the, say, the money aspect or anything like that, or some underhand sort of follow-up approach, which is understandable. People thought that, but that wasn't. And
mm,
I often thought, like, I was kind of there going, well, should I say it or should I not say it? And then I sort of said, well, I didn't want it to become about that, because I thought I was just doing the one. So I said, one and done. And, but sort of grief doesn't end with one and done. So each one has been needed, to be honest, in my life. Uh,
mm.
and that's sort of the way it continues. Because as I said, time doesn't necessarily heal, or I'm not in agreement with that statement at this point in time. I might change that. Uh,
Yeah.
so
Do you think people will change their attitude to you from a sort of a benevolent Bruce Wayne character now that they know your backstory and the real deeper reasons why you moved into this space? Do you think anything will change there?
but I'm sure my story will resonate with some people. Well, it would resonate with
Mm,
everybody, but some people maybe to a greater extent. Because some of the artists, what I do in my application process is I'm not overly interested if, I went to this college and I got a first and then I got something else somewhere, because that's not really what I'm about. I just pick the art, I suppose, that I like, but I also pick the art that I think the wider audience will like. So, but my application form is quite simple. I ask people to talk about themselves because I'm very interested. There's the art on the wall, and then there's the story behind the art, which is very important.
mm,
And actually, a lot of the time, the story completely changes the art on the wall. So sometimes it doesn't, but a lot of the time, it actually can. Like, it brings a whole new meaning. So a lot of artists would write to me about a particular story about themselves or a struggle that they've had, and it's a fantastic trust to get. So I'd be reading the stories, and then I'd see the art, and it would sort of bring it to life. And the stories that people would write to would be about loss. There's one particular artist that suffered a great loss, an unimaginable one, and you know she's focused in on sort of art as her therapy. and she just happens to be excellent at it as well. But it has assisted her. There's countless stories that have had, people struggled with mental health, and art was their outlet. Uh, Bereavement down to bullying, that type of thing, difficulties from their childhood, and art is their outlet. So art, for a lot of people, is an outlet for different situations.
Mm. Do you think, given your own experience, it has changed your attitude to art or your understanding of art? That maybe you were looking in kind of from the window, but when you actually moved into that space, you saw that it was doing more, offering people more, that it was a sort of a richer environment in there with more dimensions than you'd thought before.
Yeah, like it's because what I do for my exhibitions is like I would read a lot, and I would learn as much as I possibly could about the artist, and all artists, not just the ones who get in. I would research them all, read their stories, and like that can be very difficult sometimes because you're leaving some people out. You know,
Mm,
whose stories. So the one of the one of the things I'll probably do this year is try and bring the stories behind the art more to the forefront, so that the story is an accompaniment to the art, as opposed to the art sitting just alone on
mm,
the wall. And that changes it hugely for, because sometimes you might look at a piece and go, "Oh, no, I'm not really into that." But then personally, then when I read down the application form, I've gone, "Oh my God, that's completely different now." But most people wouldn't have the opportunity to have learned that story behind it. Uh,
mm.
Now, it's not for all art, but a lot of the time it is, and it's very interesting.
How do you pick a winner? Is it completely up to your own personal taste, that mixture of the creation and this backstory? How do you avoid just going, I like blue paintings of the sea, so they'll win
Yeah.
every year. Like
Yeah.
how do you get that balance? If it's just yourself picking this winner.
Yeah. So I've had three exhibitions. The first two I picked solely myself, and then the third one I had two other people helping me.
Mm,
And the for the first one, Sienna Fitzgerald won, and I liked her backstory a lot. It resonated a lot, and I also loved her artwork and continue to love her artwork. She has a fantastic piece in the RHA annual exhibition this year, which is really, really good. So as a package, I look at the artist. Look at where they are in their career. Obviously, I have to like their work, and then it's sort of I blend all of that together and see, would the prize assist them maybe in, moving forward in their career. Yeah, so it's just something that stands out. So I remember seeing her piece and it stood out straight away. And so it was kind of, I'll say, easy for me to pick her, because
mm,
I actually, even though I would I would have a bright disposition for whatever reason, I have quite a dark disposition towards art. I like sort of more darker art and that type of thing. So the second year, a guy called Sean O'Rourke won, and when I sat down with my best friend and we sort of went through, because like an hour before the thing, I still hadn't decided. It was kind of caught between a few, and then I just asked a couple of people, and it was funny. Like there was a couple of people, particularly actually my sister, who would have, I would call, a very straight laced taste in art. It would be, yeah, it would be, I would consider, quite safe. And I was very surprised, without any kind of direction from my side, that she liked his piece. In
mm,
a million years, I wouldn't have had her to pick that. So it kind of copper plaster in my mind. I said, yeah, I'm on the right track, and I went for him. Then the third year, I had an individual who was very involved in the arts who I invited to help choose because I wanted to mix it up as well. I think that's important as opposed to, there was nothing wrong with my choices to date at all.
Mm.
But it's always good to mix things up. And then the artist Macer then as well. He was one of the others who helped pick. So we walked around the venue, hemmed and hawed, sort of broke it down to, the kind of the three that we thought, and then we just ultimately went with Sophie Goff.
Yeah. Do you get to hear what they spend the money on?
Yeah, it's one of the hugely satisfying things. If we just take Sophie, for instance, she went. She had this secured anyway, but she went to Kyoto for. She went for I think 6 or 8 weeks on a residency, and I think because she sold her piece on the night, and from memory it was like say 2,500 or something like that, and she won obviously the 10,000 from myself, so she walked away with
Mm.
12,500. So that money, because I would still talk to her, and that money assisted her in my understanding, staying a bit longer over there and experiencing, a bit more time over there to paint and explore. So it gave her a huge boost. And she's acknowledged that in her own newsletter, which was lovely to read, because you could really see it made a difference. Because, you don't want someone sort of winning it and then booking a cruise with the family, because they're like, that's not what it's about. And
Yeah.
you hope that that's what people won't do, and none of the three have done that. They've all sort of put it into their practice, or
Mm.
or it just gives them a bit of breathing time to paint, as opposed to worry about paying the rent, so to speak.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about growing it globally? An art riddler in every major city, or taking an artist or a few artists and trying to build their profiles outside of Ireland, leveling up, so to speak, in terms of the amazing work you're doing now. Has that crossed your mind?
It has actually, yeah. I have a notebook of ideas of how to
Mm.
kind of do it. I like the purity of the exhibitions that people have seen to date, so I won't change that. Um, but I would very much. Ireland is a small pool, and it's
Mm.
one of the things I did notice back when I started going to exhibitions kind of frequently is it was the same people going to them, and they weren't necessarily people who were going to purchase. There might have been a pull factor that it was a free bar. So while
Yeah.
opening nights might have looked busy, buzzing, all of that, it which is great, but
Mm.
there was no real sales behind there. So I wanted to change that up, and I most definitely have done that because I think I had 100 pieces in last October's exhibition. I think there was around 10 sculptures as well, but I think around 60 of them sold, and that's only in the space of 10 days. So, and all like that's that I delight in that. It's great because it's a great injection and exposure for the artists. But just going back to your point, yes, Ireland is a small pool. Obviously, there's only so many people who are go to events and spend money. Just naturally, it's small in every aspect. So would I like to bring it abroad? Absolutely, yeah. And it is in the back of my mind, maybe in the middle of my mind, touching on the front.
Yeah.
So
I'd be excited to see where you could take it, because I was at last year's one and it felt different. I've been to other more straight-laced art openings, exhibition nights before, and the Art Riddler event feels different. There's a vibrancy to it, there's an openness to it, there's an accessibility. It just felt more fun. and
yeah,
um
and
and
that's what I
I
try and
didn't,
do.
I'm married to an artist, but I don't feel in any way an expert in art. I just look at something and I think, oh, I like that, or it doesn't resonate with me. You know, and I do find art openings intimidating for me, as I say, even though I am married to an artist, but yours was different. Um, and there was that sense of fun and openness and lightness about it. I think sometimes they can be heavy events. Do you find that?
Yeah, I try to make it fun because like my
Mm,
Instagram I would consider a bit of fun. Like I don't take it like obviously I do take it seriously, but I would very much in my life go with the flow and it'll be all right in the night. So and by sort of the Instagram stuff that I've done and that I try and keep it lighthearted. So and that's kind of I suppose maybe that's just more of a reflection on me as opposed to design. And there's a lot of goodwill behind the project, and it sort of then I think comes out in the event. So and then
mm,
I sort of break it down. I didn't say the first year, I don't think, but I certainly did in the most recent one. I have a sort of list of people that I'd invite, who might be sort of more on the purchasing side of things. And
mm,
I also bring the artist along on that night. So that's fun. And it's less packed. And then I open the doors sort of to everybody, the following night. So it's fun, and there is a sort of a very much a goodwill kind of aspect to it and a supportive aspect to it. And I do think it does draw people in who mightn't go to some of the we'll call them the more straight-laced
mm.
openings. So mine is a bit more well, it's not quite carnival, but you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
it's fun, it's light-hearted. So,
Yeah.
it's worked to date. The formula's worked to date, but it's just more of a reflection on how I would run an event, as opposed to anything else.
Mm. How do you feel now, having shared your story with me today? Were you nervous about it?
Yeah, I was only, to be perfectly honest, I was only nervous more so when I woke up this morning about it because
Mm,
I was there. I hope I get the message across or the story across, maybe as opposed to the message sort of accurately in that because when you are talking about it, you can stumble over your words or you can miss something or, so am I happy having said it? Yeah, absolutely. If you'd asked me, would we have been doing this podcast 3 years ago, 2 years ago? No, we wouldn't.
mm,
We wouldn't have been doing it because I'm now in a position to kind of explain my story, but explain maybe ways that can or tools that can assist people themselves. So art was my outlet. Someone else will have a different one, but go with whatever that thing is that can assist you. Be that
mm,
sport or a lot of people go off and start doing, triathlons or marathons. My worst nightmare is a marathon. So art was just my outlet and it's worked very well for me. So I would encourage people to find a different outlet and give it a go.
mm. In a way, I suppose this conversation is you taking a bit of your own personal mask off. Do you
Yeah.
think there'll be a time when you will take the Riddler mask off, and or is that anonymity too useful to you? And would you like to still protect the mystery?
Yeah, I suppose like I'm not necessarily the principles as to why I put on the mask in the first instance around the anonymity and my pictures of me on Instagram and all that kind of that would always remain. Like I'd have no interest in doing photographs of people. That's just been my hang up, if you want to call
Mm,
it that. So, but as the project expands, and if it expands further in the ways that I think it can, your anonymity is harder to keep, and that's just a natural. You have to weigh that.
mm,
Do I just want to hold on to it and keep it here and keep it simple? I could do that and I could keep the mask, or am I a benefit, by sort of loosening it up a little bit? So, yes, I think I would keep the mask on. But if you look at the other people who wear masks out there, you have Blind Boy, just say, for instance. So if you were bothered, you could go off and Google what he looks like.
Mhm.
But personally speaking, I'm not bothered. Uh, I like him a lot. I listen to his podcast and that kind of thing. So his name presumably is out there, and his face no doubt is on the internet somewhere. But he still wears his mask. People respect that, and I think I'll just continue on in that same vein. So if people figure out my name or who I am or think who I am, like I do, there was one lady. She seems to jump out from behind pillars at a couple of the openings that I go from, and she's there. It's you, like on her. It's not, but it's not me until I say it's me. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, one of my favorite bands is a band called Sleep Token, and they're sort of in this weird. I'd compare them to you actually in terms of the uh, very much, I guess, musically they're very much doing their own thing. They've been described as genre busting because the songs can go in any direction. Just like all the art that you support and celebrate, it can go anywhere, and your own tastes expand and change and over time. And they all wear masks, and they've created this kind of lore behind the band and all that. And I think that's I've been to their shows in the UK, and that sense of mystery is really important to me. I love it. It adds an extra layer, and it's nice to create those stories in your mind and engage with that and kind of celebrate the mystery and the performance and the theater of it all, because it just adds more fun and a different way of seeing things.
There's a bit more freedom when you wear a mask. Now, you're
Mm.
sweating under the mask, but you're kind of more comfortable doing some putting yourself out there. Like, I've done some odd videos, if you ever look back on them. So, like, I wore a mask and I came out at the sea in Sea Point, like just wearing my mask, like, so got a friend to record it. So I wouldn't necessarily be doing that now without the mask. But you get to do some fun stuff because you're a bit
Yeah,
freer. Artistic license, maybe, is the term. So that's good. That's fun.
yeah, that's true. Well, look, Art Riddler, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us all today. I really, really do appreciate it. I know it can't be easy, and I know, each day is bringing challenges. But I think you've offered an awful lot of help. You mentioned the word message there, and you kind of said it by accident, but I think the message you've shared with people is an important one, is to find that space that offers you an escape or an opportunity to heal outside of the day to day. Um, and I think there's something beautiful in your whole story. And I'm sure it doesn't feel beautiful to you all the time, but in a way, it is art. You know, um, it,
Yeah.
it it's art in itself, and that's not to belittle it or to try and put it in a cozy, pretty box or anything like that. Um, but it is. I think people are going to get so much from this conversation, and from your story, and really, really engage with it. So, thank you. I want to thank you for your time.
Can I make one shameless plug?
Please do.
My exhibition will be taking place in the same venue, so I know you're familiar with it. It's called One Charmant Square, just off Charmant Street there in Dublin 2, and it'll be on October coming this year. So people can follow my Instagram account for updates.
Absolutely. I'll be giving all the details in and around our conversation, and I'll remind people in a few minutes of all the things you just said. And definitely, I will be there. I will be possibly avoiding the free beer that you put on, because I did drink a beer last time and I bought four pieces
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
exhibition. But I have to say, I'm very glad I bought them, because they bring me so much joy. I've hung them in around the stairs. Every time I go up the stairs, I see these beautiful pieces of art by Annette Smith and Riley Waite and Hazel Kuna. And they're just ones I saw on the night that were like, wow, they're amazing. And it's a great opportunity to discover new artists and to get a sense of all this incredible creativity that's happening, behind closed doors all across the country. And plus you get to meet the artists on the night as well, because most of them are there.
Yeah, no, that's true. And so I suppose I say to you, thank you very much for having me on and listening to me.
Yeah, it's been great. See you on the night.
All right, thanks, Dermot. Bye.
Thanks, Art Riddler.
All right, see you. Take care.